The Philippines said more than 135 Chinese vessels were swarming a reef off its coast.
The tensions in the South China Sea are rising, and the Philippines is relying on an old friend to fight its biggest battles. Israel and the Philippines go way back, but even in complex geopolitical climates, the two allies have successfully sustained their diplomatic relations. In this video, we're going to talk about Filipino support during the Holocaust, the strategic military alliance, and why Tel Aviv would need Manila in the years to come. Let's get started. Between 1937 and 1941, the persecuted Jews of Europe found an unlikely home. Jewish immigration to the US and the UK had hit a maximum. This is when many Eastern Asian nations began to welcome them. One of those countries was the Philippines, which accepted 1,200 Jewish immigrants. Most of these vulnerable groups came from Germany and Austria. During the same time, persecution under the Nuremberg laws had intensified. But of course, WBG was yet to hit its peak in the Philippines. Soon after the Jewish immigration, a new war broke out in Manila. The Japanese occupation of the Philippines was brutal. The Battle of Manila was bloody. Many Jews felt like they had chosen the wrong home for themselves and their children. However, the country proved itself to be relentless in many ways, and the Filipino army was able to regain control of their capital. Their welcome of the persecuted Jews is a benchmark of the Israel-Philippines alliance today. The origins of this friendship go back to the times of Manuel Quezon. He was the first president of the Philippines Commonwealth. During his time, the country would lay the first seed of its friendship with Israel. You might not know this, but Quezon actually had a plan to welcome 10,000 Jews during the Holocaust. He was supposed to settle them in the southern island of Mindanao, but the Japanese had attacked the country's shores, so a large-scale settlement wasn't on the table. However, the Philippines' pro-immigration policy had been adopted at a very critical time. Many educated Jews and rabbis were being strategically executed by the Nazis. That's when a US-Philippines alliance began to look over the Refugee Commission. The country's useful role in helping the victims of the Holocaust is celebrated. It was also the country's hospitality that led it to support modern Israel. The Philippines is one of the 33 countries that voted for the UN Resolution 181. The very same resolution sought to divide Palestine into an Arab and a Jewish state. The passing of the resolution led to the creation of Israel, and today 181 serves as the contesting ground for the plight of millions of Palestinians. When Israel declared itself as independent, the Philippines was quick to recognize it officially. In 1957, both of the countries had established diplomatic ties, and in the following year, they signed a friendship treaty. The current Filipino government views Israel as a central ally in the Middle East. The Philippines backed Israel to save it from any international criticism. In 2017, the country supported Trump's decision to open a US embassy for Israel in Jerusalem. The UN decided to reaffirm Jerusalem as a contested territory in the GA, yet the Philippines abstained from voting. A year later, Rodrigo Duterte did something historical. He became the first Filipino president to visit Israel. Duterte was passionate about making an independent foreign policy that wasn't just pro-US. However, his successor's main ally in the West is Israel's biggest ally too. And this is why Marcos Jr.'s response to the current escalation in the region has been pretty strategic. Let's break that down, shall we? Over the course of years, the Philippines has been passive about Israel's geopolitical issues. For the most part, it has served as a silent cheerleader from the margins. On October 7, 2023, Hamas initiated a massive military campaign against Tel Aviv. The organization fired thousands of rockets into Israel. The IDF's response to the escalation was an extreme bombing in Gaza and a more strict blockade. A new-fledged war has killed 10,000 Palestinians as per multiple sources. In the midst of the war, many world leaders have called for a complete ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. When the matter was taken to the UN, the General Assembly agreed upon a humanitarian truce. 120 countries voted in favor of the resolution, and 45 countries abstained to support Israel's right to self-defense. The Philippines was one of them. The response to Manila's silence was explosive. Thousands of Filipino protesters were on the street. Later, protesters staged a demonstration in front of the Israeli embassy in Manila. Finding the video interesting? Give it a like and subscribe to our channel. It's clear that many Filipinos want an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East, but Marcos Jr. is shying away from taking any key decisions. His first priority is to follow the Biden administration, and secondly, he wants to counter China. It's a no-brainer. Both of these tangents are two sides of the same coin. The most important factor here is the recent escalations in the South China Sea. Marcos has a huge incentive to strengthen its ties with the NATO bloc. Even though the Philippines isn't a member, the US regards it as the biggest non-NATO ally, and that comes at the cost of supporting Israel diplomatically. For the Philippines, the trade-off is clear. After all, Israel has been an important military ally for the country. Both states have formal and informal agreements to build their counter-terrorism military prowess. We're just not talking about the strategic use of military bases and joint training exercises. Israel has a proficient weapons manufacturing sector for a reason. According to the Middle East Institute, Tel Aviv has a huge weapons market in Manila. Between 2001 and 2018, Israel sold Blue Horizon UAVs, combat radars, and AD-Star air search radar systems to Manila. Plus, the Philippines also received towed guns, anti-tank systems, and multiple platform aircraft radars. In 2022, Israel and the Philippines also signed new military cooperation agreements. According to these agreements, both countries decided to mutually build their naval defense. In the same year, Duterte had galvanized its Horizon 2 revised Armed Forces of the Philippines Modernization Program. As per the Modernization Act, the Philippines would spend $6 billion to acquire weapons till 2027. For Duterte's plans to work, the military ties with Israel were very important. When Marcos Jr. got into power, he followed suit. As of now, the Philippines has a long way to go till 2027 arrives. During this timeframe, it aims to build sea forces that can rival China in the South China Sea. Of course, these plans are ambitious. However, experts believe that Marcos Jr. will use his ambiguity over Palestine strategically. His goal will be to leverage more military support from both the US and Israel. In the meantime, the country will also continue to build economic ties with Tel Aviv. And here's how the Philippines actually benefits from the escalation in Gaza. This is where the dynamics get tipped. So far, we've talked about how the Philippines needs military cooperation from Israel. However, experts believe that this power dynamic might get a bit flexible. You see, Israel's recent campaign in Gaza has crushed its economy. In 2 months or less, Israel's economic growth has dropped by 3%. Some economists also predict that Netanyahu might not be able to afford a prolonged war. After all, he is dropping $260 million every passing day to fund the war. His larger goal is to sustain the control of Israeli territories, and that requires some heavy cash. When Tel Aviv starts to rebuild its trade, it will rely on the Philippines in several ways. Foremost, many Filipino workers prefer to work in Israel for their better-paying jobs. The visa process is easy, so many Filipino youth migrate to Israel for work and education opportunities. In the light of the recent events, many Filipinos were forced to return. But the situation will settle, and Israel will definitely see an influx of Filipino immigrants. Over the past year, Manila has been an important trade partner for the war-ridden nation. In particular, the country's technological sector has welcomed many Israeli IT companies. In fact, the cheap Filipino supply chain systems and labor are monumental for Tel Aviv. Before October 7th, the Philippines had planned to increase bilateral trade. Their target was to facilitate $1 billion worth of goods and services. Of course, that plan faces some hurdles now, but when the war dies down, Tel Aviv will look for new markets in Asia. It will also be keen on increasing its export bill and to look for cheap manufacturing hubs. This is where the Philippines comes in. The country has expressed interest in buying furnished goods from Israel already. All we need to do is to wait for the war to end. Many economic and war experts are wary of the Philippines' over-reliance on Tel Aviv. It's a risky dynamic for sure, but as you know, everything seems to be fair when there's a war brewing. Found the video informative? Give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and watch more of our videos.